I am proud to introduce our guest, Thomas Frank. He has been on our show in the past. We've interviewed him at many key events, and plus, he is the one who took us on a very infamous toxic tour way back in 2016.
Oh, man, it's been a while.
It has been a while. So, Thomas Frank, for our listeners, especially now you're here in our studio, can you please introduce yourself?
Well, I'm Thomas Frank. I'm with, is this on?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, just move a little closer.
Okay, I'm with Calumet Lives Matter in Northwest Indiana and the Community Strategy Group. Also founded 350 Indiana down there. So we focus down on Northwest Indiana as a marginalized community. We are kind of an industrial colony of Chicago. Mm-hmm. So with Calumet Lives Matter, we're focusing on a specific neighborhood that has been heavily impacted by oppression, discrimination, racism, environmental justice. It's heavily contaminated, and we're focused on redevelopment in that neighborhood. The other, with the Community Strategy Group, we work with the community, organizing the community on environmental justice issues in the region of Northwest Indiana. And then 350 Indiana, we focus on climate justice,
right,
and issues that arise, due to the oil infrastructure that we have.
Yeah, I think a lot of our viewers don't really understand the laissez-faire policies that Indiana has in regards to the large industrial and fossil fuel companies that are there. And as we all know, they're dumping quote-unquote regulated toxic waste into Lake Michigan. So can you clarify exactly what these steel mills are? These fossil fuel corporations. What are they doing there? How do they get the ability to basically do what they want to the local water sources?
Okay, just to describe the existing conditions.
Okay,
in Northwest Indiana, in East Chicago, and on its borders in Gary and a little bit in Whiting, we have the largest tar sands refinery in the country, and that's BP. And that was a brand new investment, $4.5 billion. It's the largest investment in Indiana's history. And that occurred in the last 4 years. Built a brand new refinery under everybody's noses. It was very, very apparent what was happening there. In East Chicago, we also have ArcelorMittal with the largest blast furnace in the Western Hemisphere located there. We also have U.S. Steel in East Chicago and specifically in Gary, one of the largest integrated steel mills in the world. This is all right here on this industrial colony of Chicago. You were talking a little bit about Foxconn and how they're being permitted to withdraw 7 million gallons a day of water from Lake Michigan,
right?
And that's a problem. But to put it in context, our U.S. Steel withdraws over 1.3 billion gallons of water a day.
Wow.
Not 7 million, 1.3 billion. They also discharge back into Lake Michigan lots of heavily contamination. One of the things that happened in Northwest Indiana is that these industries were here for a short period of time, this last 100 years, but they predate the EPA by over 70 years. And when the EPA was formed in 1970, what occurred was the industry and the local government agencies partnered together to establish their own regulatory agencies. And so for the first 20 years of the EPA in Northwest Indiana, East Chicago and Gary had their own departments of environmental management that issued permits and did regulation and regulated or enforcement. Of course, there was no enforcement.
Okay.
So what we're finding today is that these entities, these industrial entities, have been given a clean slate. There's a reason why these heavy, dirty industries are located outside Illinois and right on the borders in Indiana and on Lake Michigan, because Indiana's regulatory agencies, IDEM, Indiana Department of Environmental Management, is very relaxed. We have some of the most relaxed regulations in the country. We rank amongst the worst in the country in terms of industrial releases. I'll give you an example. In our airshed, there are 3,143 counties in the U.S.
Okay.
Lake County generally, in and of itself, generally ranks in the top 10 for industrial releases into the atmosphere. The problem there is not just that they discharge all that and it impacts the local community, but it also, because of the northeasterlies, it blows it out into Lake Michigan. And that comes back over Chicago. And so, in fact, these industries are the third and fourth and fifth most, our first, second, and third largest contributors to Chicago's airshed, industrial contamination to Chicago's airshed.
Wow.
So because they discharge so much. We also have some of the most polluted waterways in the country. We have the Indiana Shipping Canal, which is considered one of the most impacted communities in East Chicago, or in the country. We're getting a dredging project right now, and that's changing. But the problem that we have there is because the impacts have been so severe, we get a lot of capping projects. We don't get cleanup projects. And there's when it comes to the land that we use, now I've talked about the air, the water, and now the land. We're the community where we had to, last year, force evacuate 1,200 people from a low-income housing complex because it was built right on top of a lead refinery.
That's West Calumet.
That's West Calumet. So those are the conditions that we live under. These are normal conditions, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And if you push up against that, and especially, these have been open secrets, for 40 years. And if you start pushing up against that, you're impacting power, and power is going to push back.
Right.
And that's what we're beginning to see. And in fact, we're beginning to see that expressed in the Democratic primaries that are coming up. You have the Democratic establishment, which is in pushing back against the Bernie Democrats.
Right.
Where in Indiana, the Bernie Democrats won. But the establishment is not accepting that at all, and they're going to assert their power.
It just reminds me again that how the Democratic Party still has not learned its lesson from 2016, and how the Democrats are still embracing neoliberal policies.
And further than even neoliberal, the idea that they are the ones that are the right people to choose who should win in a district, completely bypassing the people in the district.
I'm quite curious, since there's a lot of pushback from the progressive Bernie Sanders Democrats that are running in Indiana. Has the Indiana Democratic Parties made any kind of statements that are similar to what the DCCC stated in regards to we will favor whoever we want to? There's nothing wrong with rigging a primary or an election. Same thing as that Nancy Pelosi said, that she didn't see anything wrong with rigging a primary as well. Perhaps it's but I mean, of course, there's more to take into context. But I mean, is that what the Indiana Democratic Party is right now doing towards the Bernie Sanders Democrats?
Not forward, not outwardly.
Yeah.
What they're doing is they're trying to co-opt and enter these progressive spaces that are being organized.
Oh, so they're taking, when they once took the name liberal, now they're trying to take the name progressive.
Now they're trying to take over the progressive label with utilizing the same neoliberal policies. Okay. And that's the thing that we're seeing. Right now we have a couple, this is a fantastic space. Chicago has a lot of wonderful progressive spaces where people are organizing, doing lots of great things. It's a real difficult for young organizers in Northwest Indiana to have these kinds of spaces. And we do have one in Michigan City called Park.
Shout out to Michigan City.
Michigan City with Vince Emanuele and Sergio formed this. It's a fantastic space. And these are real intentional progressive spaces. And we're seeing the Democrats establishment kind of entering into these spaces and trying to enter in a lot of neoliberal policies, trying to divert a lot of the dialogue. And there's a lot of pushback on that,
Right. So basically, so now that they're trying to do that, what is the initial response from independents and progressive Democrats there? Because it seems like when neoliberal Democrats try to implement these policies, such as we only can maybe negotiate on this much, or we're going to have to compromise, till you basically gave away everything. Is that what's happening there?
Well, right now, we get wrapped up in the local
municipal
electoral cycles, and right now we have a primary on Tuesday.
Okay.
So things are really heating up, and we have the Democratic establishment pointing its fingers at liberals, or I'm not liberals, but the progressive wing, and saying that they're being divisive or they're doing purity testing. The idea of purity testing is just erroneous because the progressives have Bernie Sanders' platform, and it's a very broad left platform, and it's very clear, it's very simple, and there is no purity test. But if you're going to enter into these spaces and say, I am not going to fight for healthcare for all, I'm going to fight for Obamacare, it's going to be difficult. So there's a lot of pushback. Many young progressives are trying to weigh. This is chasing people from the political process, especially with the old politics. They're walking away from these spaces, but the progressives are growing. The awareness is growing. We tend to, in Northwest Indiana, adopt national policies 20, 30 years after they're introduced elsewhere. And so when a program has run its course in Chicago, you'll start seeing those programs showing up in Northwest Indiana 15, 20 years later.
Oh, wow.
And so we're trying to reconnect Northwest Indiana to the larger region. When we organize, we're not trying to organize alone. We're trying to organize broadly with other groups. We organize on the southeast side. One of the great successes of progressive politics was through the Ban Petcoat Coalition and fighting the Koch brothers in the southeast side. We were able to get Bernie Sanders to show up and support Sue Garza against in the 10th Ward against an incumbent machine politician, John Pope, and she was able to win. Sue has continued with her intuition to move forward with progressive policies and programs. She's now fighting another what's called a CDF, a confined disposal facility that the Army Corps wants to locate in the 10th Ward.
Okay.
This would be the second CDF. No, there's not another CDF in any of the wards in Chicago. But for some reason, the Army Corps continues to pick on this district, this ward. If you know the 10th Ward in the southeast side, there's a plethora of landfills. Basically, because of the 10th Ward, there is a moratorium on landfills in Cook County because of this clustering in that area. Over 60% of the land use in the 10th Ward is industrial. Only 23 is residential. And there's what's called the toxic donut in that area. So Sue Garza is saying enough is enough. And progressives in Northwest Indiana are growing stronger and saying enough is enough. We have the similar situation in East Chicago. 80% of the land use is industrial, and only 17% is residential. At some point, we're worried after the Superfund site and a lot of other issues. Residents in East Chicago are actually worried, is this even livable here?
Yeah, because I remember when we first met, that was way back in 2016. It was in East Chicago, West Calumet, and it had to deal with the soil contamination. And I still remember it like it was yesterday when we went to speak to the State Department, at least the Indiana EPA their local version of the EPA, their State Department. They stated to us that the EPA was not there, or they didn't know where they were at, when, in fact, if you just cross the street, the Federal Environmental Protection Agency was right there, and they were there the whole time. And I remember asking both groups, well, okay, the soil's contaminated, but is the water contaminated too? And we got a definite no. No, the water's not contaminated, but then we find out a few months later that the water was contaminated. And a school that was rebuilt with, I believe it was $12 million was put into it to be rebuilt, had to then be shut down. And I think Daniel has the number of the amount of lead contamination that was in the soil. How much lead was in the soil?
Again, going back, I mean, you probably have better, more updated numbers than I do since it's your area. But I remember that we had, if you had under 200 parts per million, that's fine. That seems like a natural distribution of lead. If it's over 400 parts, the EPA on paper is supposed to come in, remove all the soil or cap it or whatever they want to choose to do.
Yeah.
And then they have front lawns that had 90,000 parts. So one thing I want to go back to is we talked about this a lot last time you were here, is just how, maybe not sneaky isn't the right word, but how sneaky they were and how they would say, oh, this is fine. Like, oh, they would just drill a hole down that's a meter wide, and they say, well, there's no lead here, so there's no lead anywhere else in the town.
Yeah, so let me first say this is because it's an Superfund program. It is an EPA program, and they're managing this. And
just for the record, it's the same EPA that's managing Flint.
Right. And so just to kind of clarify things really quickly. We know that for the last 40 years, EPA has neglected and allowed a lot of things to happen, and that has harmed the community.
Right.
But that isn't an excuse to say that they are not the solution going forward. Got to remember the EPA was operating from Reagan on to Obama under neoliberal principles. And those have betrayed a community like East Chicago, and we're now beginning to see the ramification of that. But what we do need to do is we need to strengthen the EPA so that they are not subsumed by the market and only coming up with market solutions. What we found out this last week is Pruitt, the head of the EPA, his number 2 man is Albert Kelly. Albert Kelly is the head of the Superfund program, and he has been in East Chicago regularly, walking the streets with a lot of bankers and stuff like that, trying to figure things out. But Albert Kelly ran into a lot of problems. A lot of investigations have occurred. He was a banker down in Kentucky. He's lost his ability to bank because of fraudulent behavior. And that has triggered a lot of other investigations. This past week, he resigned. Mm-hmm. We're very happy with that because he's been operating ad hoc in East Chicago, making decisions in an ad hoc fashion and not setting up policy.
You're right. So, and I just want everyone to know, because, for a long time, I think a lot of people who heard about East Chicago and most importantly, even Flint, Michigan, probably everyone was thinking, okay, well, it's sorry for them. It's not me. There's something should be done. But now we're seeing this problem at a much more larger national level. And here in Chicago, a major metropolitan city, our entire water is contaminated with lead.
Yes,
it's in our water too, on the north side and south side. So I mean, both sides of Chicago are impacted, from the well-to-do communities to the low-income communities. And so again, it goes to show you that neoliberalism and neoliberal policies have been impacting us. But there's another issue that I want to talk to you about, and it's very important because it's happening not this weekend, but next weekend. There's a huge major protest that you're going to be a part of. You sent me it. Unfortunately, we're here. At Heartlands Media, we were always filming between like 11 and 1. It's going to be happening a little bit earlier. So can you please tell us what that protest is? What is it about? What is happening?
So 350 Indiana Calumet is hosting what's called Walk the Pipeline. We're walking the extension of the pipeline. It's about 3-4 miles in this case from the Enbridge Line 6B, which is the pipeline that broke in the Kalamazoo River caused over $1.2 billion of damage and still hasn't been cleaned up. And that pipeline is going from Enbridge Line 6B to BP, and we're walking that. So next Saturday, or May 12th, at 8 a.m., we are walking from Calumet College, Purdue Calumet, or Purdue Northwestern, all the way to East Chicago to the BP refinery. And we'll be gathering very early to do this walk at 8 o'clock. And this is not a protest. This is just to bring the bar down, to bring people in so they can see and be a part of the space where this pipeline extends. So that's what's going to be happening on May 12th. What we're doing tonight is we're opening an art show called "The Art of Resistance and Resilience in Northwest Indiana," and that's a show of artists and activists coming together, showing their work together about what has been happening in Northwest Indiana this last several years and the movement building that has been occurring.
Is that at which place is that at?
So that's at Paul Henry's Art Gallery in Hammond. The address is 416 Sibley in Hammond, Indiana. It starts at 5 and continues till 9 p.m.
Just a quick reminder, because I think maybe me and Daniel probably think the same thing. Is that the same place where we filmed for the protesters, the Dakota Access Pipeline protesters?
So when we, a few years back, in 2016, May 2016, we organized Break Free Midwest, where we had Bill McKibben here, Tara Huska of Honor the Earth, and she was the Indigenous liaison to Bernie Sanders' campaign.
Okay.
We had Malik Yusuf, 5-time Grammy Award-winning singer with the Hip Hop Caucus. And we brought 1,500 people, and we had 41 people that got arrested shutting down the BP refinery. You came down when we were coming out of the courthouse.
Right.
And that was what we called the Whiting 41. So those arrestees had to appear before court. And so we did a whole street theater and performance at Paul Henry's. We organized out of Paul Henry's to do that. Yeah.
And I got to say, on a completely separate note from the event, I still remember that it's a very lovely studio. It just has, everywhere you look, it's something interesting, something historical.
Yeah, I loved every single minute of it, too. I know that Daniel stayed there a little bit longer than I did because I had to leave, unfortunately, and I'm regretting it on that day. But, I mean, hopefully we'll have another opportunity to go back out there to see it again.
And the nice thing is, when I was there was an inch of ice on the entire road, which
it
is
was
a lot
a
of
nasty day.
trying
Yeah.
to do a march there. But
yeah, you guys were soldiers, man. You guys really pushed forward on that one.
Yeah, so it's Paul Henry's is in it. It's an art gallery, but it's in a old hardware store. And in fact, Dave Mueller, who owns it, it's been in his family for 8 generations since the 1880s when it was built. So
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
So he converted into an art gallery, and so we do a lot of organizing out of there and do a lot of shows. It's a wonderful, wonderful space.
But it goes back to what you were saying about, like, here in Chicago, we have a lot of people, so it makes sense that there's a lot of spots that people, whether it's this show or other locations, that people can go to. But, the history of that place really does fit what it represents now and allows this. I mean, it really... from being in Indiana, it's not as populated. There aren't as many people around to put things together as again we have here. But you guys you're still fighting.
Yeah, we're doing a lot of things. We just had a protest at the Gary Airport just yesterday. We did a lot of organizing. Many people in your listening area may not realize it, but in the last 10 years, over 21,000 immigrants have been deported out of the Gary airport.
Why is it only Gary, Indiana?
Or
the Gary, Indiana airport?
We do know that there's a jet center there that has a contract with ICE, and so they take all the deportees from Milwaukee and all the Chicagoland area, and they bus them every Friday to the Gary airport. So we've been raising the awareness of that. Also on top of that, we've been fighting a GEO or a for-profit. GEO is a for-profit immigration detention center that they want to build there. We fought them 3 times, actually 4 times in Northwest Indiana, 3 times in our region, once in Hobart and twice in Gary, and we've won all 4 times.
Wow.
The most recent battle that we had was in Goshen, Indiana, where they wanted to locate out there. We beat them there as well. So they're getting more aggressive.
Okay, so I know we have such a short amount of time, but this organization, you've beat them 4 times. But I got to ask, okay, they're obviously a large corporation. They've got money. Who are they supporting in elections? Do you have a list of what senators or elected officials are? Because I mean, the thing is that they keep coming back, and my skeptical mind is, or at least what I'm thinking is that okay, they got some politician, be it Democrat or Republican, both that embrace neoliberal policies.
They got to be paying someone.
They got to have somebody in their corner.
And they keep coming back in Democratic districts.
Wow.
So one of the things that happens here. When they come back, they feel they're coming back with everything taken care of. So they know we're going to oppose them. So they have a lot of backroom deals. They've dropped money with, preachers, churches, different council people in Gary or other communities or in the region. One of the things that caused a controversy recently, and unfortunately I was the one that exposed it, is we're on Tuesday. There's one of the big races in Northwest Indiana or Lake County is a sheriff's race, and the acting sheriff, or he's now the sheriff, is Oscar Martinez, because the previous sheriff Bunchik was just indicted, is now in prison. So he's serving out that term. So on Tuesday we're having a primary again for sheriff, and Oscar Martinez, unfortunately, I don't know if he did his homework, but he hired a jail warden from Geo Prison for Lake County just this past month. I shared out the resume, and that had caused hell in Northwest Indiana. I've gotten attacked by establishment Democrats like you wouldn't believe by sharing that out, as if I was trying to be divisive, but just sharing out the information.
But they were going to make some good money. And
Yeah,
you got in the way of that.
So I can't tell you. I can't tell you what really occurred.
Right.
I suspect people are good people, but they make lousy decisions. I don't know.
Well, it just goes to show you again. Look, it's quite clear there's corruption. Republicans do it, but the Democrats are just as guilty of it too. Both parties embrace neoliberal policies, and these neoliberal policies are affecting our environment, our society, and how we live. And it's really important that we hold these people accountable. And the Democrats, if you keep on embracing these neoliberal policies, well, then it's no wonder you're going to keep on losing elections. Look at 2016. If you haven't learned your lesson then you're going to keep on failing. You're going to keep on losing.
You're going to keep on blaming someone else.
Yeah, you're going to keep on blaming people that don't have power. And instead of fighting for the people, you're embracing the very same organizations and groups that are imprisoning us, that are crippling us, that are poisoning us. So I know we got to enter into our break. Thomas, I wish we could have you on here longer because there's so much more I want to talk to you about.
One day when we have a podcast and we get long form, you'll be the first we call.
Yes. So the thing is, the organizations, you mentioned Park as well as a few other events. Where can we find out more about these organizations online, social media? Where can we find them?
Most of these organizations are organizing through Facebook. So you can find the Community Strategy Group on Facebook. You can find Calumet Lives Matter on Facebook. 350indiana.org or 350 Indiana on Facebook you can find as well. And Park, that's Politics, Arts, Roots, and Culture out in Michigan City. And if you haven't been out there, I really encourage people to go out there. It's amazing.
I'm going to make this promise. We are going to do our very best to head out there to Michigan City. I haven't been there in a long time. I have some long family history there.
I'll just join Kit, I guess.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, definitely, man. Come on, man. I'm going to drag you with me. Are you kidding me?
I guess I'll just come with.
So, Thomas, again, thank you so much for joining us. I know you got to run out to your art show, so all the best to you on that. And to our viewing audience, if you're listening to us, please like us on social media. Follow us on our webpage, hardlensmedia.com, HARDLENSMEDIA.com. Plus, we have a Patreon page. If you like what we do, please give a donation. Your support is the main heart and backbone to everything that we do here.
And I also want to add in, since to give a little enticement, if you are a patron and we have 3 different levels. You can either give like $1 because we know people have it very hard.
Yeah.
You get $5, you get your name. Whenever we do a video, your name will be in the credit. And if you for $10, you actually get to come and watch the show with us right here. What we're doing right now, what you're hearing, you can be at.
You could be part of the live audience, and we will entertain you. Other than that, we're going to enter our second break, so we're going to cover one more story, and then we're going to have our second guest, Fritz Kagi, who is endorsed by Our Revolution Illinois. Peace, everyone, and see you in the second hour.